Republican presidential candidates continue to pitch their message to the voters in Iowa. 13 candidates showed up in Iowa this weekend, trying to get voters to listen to them and not the other candidates. The candidates touched on many of the issues, including crime, agriculture, and spending.
Imagine what it'd be like to have a president that actually understands what working people are actually doing and what our farmers, our ranchers, and everybody that are that are feeding and fueling the world is what people in Iowa do. It's what we do in North Dakota.
When I'm president, we will stop the spending, we will stop the borrowing, we will eliminate the earmarks, and I will veto any spending bill that doesn't take us back to pre-COVID levels.
I think it's all about supporting law enforcement. It's all about giving law enforcement the tools to be able to do your job, okay, particularly in some of our major cities, is allowing law enforcement to engage in programs like stop and frisk programs.
All right, so sampling of some of the candidates there. Meanwhile, former President Donald Trump remains the dominant candidate in the polls. The latest poll from Monmouth University puts Trump at 54%, with Ron DeSantis at 22%, and the rest of the field at either 5% or less. Trump spoke out in Erie this weekend, criticizing President Biden and his family.
When we win the election, a little more than a year from now, I will appoint a real special prosecutor to expose the monumental corruption of the Biden crime family once and for all.
Now, the fact is that the former president continues his campaign at a time when he is facing now more charges in the federal case surrounding the classified documents investigation that were found at his home in Florida. How is this all playing out? Let's bring in our political panel on the Hill this morning. Bryan DeAngelis is a Democratic strategist with the Penta Group and the former communications director for Senator Chris Dodd. And Lauren Tomlinson is a GOP strategist with Steer PR and the former communications director for Senator Saxby Chambliss. Good to have both of you. You know, it's interesting. We saw that little sampling of the other candidates that are running for the Republican nomination. Then Trump comes in. And listen, listening to sound on audio, you can tell the buzz in the room during that Trump sound we just heard. You could hear a pin drop on those other candidates. They do not seem to be able to match this intensity, to match the energy in this room. How do they punch through at this point?
I think their biggest opportunity to punch through at this point is going to be at the debate. And that is the game. You talk to any of the candidates, that is what they're trying to do. They are trying to reach those polling numbers, get that small donor numbers up so they can be on the debate stage. And I hope, and I think this is what a lot of their advisors are prepping them for, is that's the opportunity in which they start to take it to Donald Trump. They really start to hit him on his record. They start to attack him, because as we saw in 2016, you are not going to beat Donald Trump unless you attack him head on. He's already attacking them, right? So I think that's what you're going to see, and that's going to be the turning point. It's too early right now. People are just shaking hands, and in Iowa and New Hampshire in particular, you have to meet those voters several times before they'll vote for you. So that's why I think there's a lot of ground game going on. So I wouldn't take too much away from big, large speeches like this. Yeah,
but Bryan, you look at the 2016 debates when they happened. There was a large field of candidates back then. They didn't seem to be able to punch through on Trump at all. The guy who maybe had one of the better debate performances against Trump was Joe Biden. So do the Republicans look at Joe Biden for any kind of inspiration about how to deal with Donald Trump in a debate?
Well, I think the best thing that happened to Donald Trump was the wide Republican field. Somebody has to make this a two-person race, and they're going to have to break through, as Lauren said, on those debates. They can look to Biden. They can look to some of the other candidates that landed punches. But if it's 5, 6, 7 against 1, Trump has one of the most solid political floors I've ever seen. He's going to run away with this.
Well, Lauren, all of this campaigning is going on really as we continue to look at what's going to be coming out of the special prosecutor's prosecution case right now. There is a line of TV trucks, if anybody goes down by the federal courthouse near the Capitol, that has been parked there for a week. The expectation is we could be days, perhaps this week, perhaps soon, where another indictment is going to come out, this one perhaps about the insurrection. When Trump faces these legal challenges, though, it seems to boost him, though. Other candidates back in the day probably would have been laid out by this. Why does he continue to draw strength from this when, traditionally in politics, this would have been, something that would wipe out a campaign?
So I think when you say strength, I think we have to recognize that he has a very solid floor, as Bryan was just saying, that is steady at 30%, right? When you look at the polling, it really has not gone up or down from that as far as like a base of support. So he has a very loyal GOP following, which is why we're so concerned about it for the GOP primaries. But I do not think that this bolsters him in any other.
So when Monmouth University says he's at 54, do you not buy that?
No, I don't, because I do think there's a factor of nobody has seen what the other candidates are going to show, and it's too early to really take into these accounts. And also, again, people haven't really started attacking him, and those indictments, when they come down, I think that's when people will start to give it a second look. You hear the one-off voters right now, if you do the man on the street interviews, kind of second guessing, but then if the pollster asks them, they say, no, Donald Trump. So I think that there's still a lot to be seen here, and the effects, a lot of these polls have been done before a lot of the announcements.
Now, Bryan, while the former president has legal troubles, you know, the Biden family, we know this week, has been dealing with a lot of headline-making news. Hunter Biden's plea deal fell apart, apparently like wet paper this week, on account of the judge not really understanding or going along with what had been agreed to besides. How bad is it that this drumbeat continues for Biden, that he has to keep talking about his son? When asked, there was a story about another granddaughter this past week. The president didn't seem to really appreciate a reporter asking him about this. This stuff was supposed to go away this week. It didn't. Is that a problem?
It's a distraction for sure in a week where we should be talking exclusively about Trump's growing legal challenges. We are talking about Hunter Biden as well, but I think it will get settled in the coming weeks and months. I think at the end of the day, this will be a blip on the radar, whereas Trump's going to be in court in May and have some serious legal challenges for the general election.
I want to ask about something else that happened this week. There was an incident, an alarming incident this week with the House Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, where he just froze during a news questioning session for 20 seconds. Finally had to be kind of maybe moved away from the microphone this week. At the same time last week, we had a scene with the Democratic California Senator Dianne Feinstein where she seemingly became incredibly confused about just casting a vote. Do we have to have some kind of driver's test at some point for our lawmakers? We have, you know, one of the oldest Congresses right now seated in Washington, but we seem to have no vehicle for dealing with these situations, which is getting very serious if you see some of the things that happened this week.
I would argue that there should be no driver's test. That's what the voters are for in elections. And I do think that, you know, even when we look at the presidency and what's written in the Constitution about how you can qualify as president, there's really not a lot of qualifications there. And I think that's what makes America so strong as a democracy, is that we can truly send whoever. That being said, I do think that voters, we need to start having a national conversation about the average age of Congress rising. I do think that we're also talking about two 80-year-olds running for president this time around.
But, you know, you're correct. The voters did elect these senators. However, they didn't elect the staffers that are telling these senators what to do, and they become so confused in a situation they can't make heads or tails. Is there a conversation that we could have, since both political parties have dealt with this in the last days?
That's where I think it should lie. I think the political parties that support these candidates, that put them into power, that provide them with a lot of resources, this is where we should have the conversation. Where is the next generation of leaders? How can they work with their stars to say, this is a good time to maybe move on and a good time to elect someone new?
All right, speaking of moving on, Bryan, Lauren, we appreciate both of you coming in and joining us live this Sunday morning.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
We got much